Alrighty, good to see you all. Welcome to class. Quick update on Canvas. I did get contacted by the people in the Teaching and Learning Innovation Department, and they're going to elevate the issue up to the Canvas people. However, Canvas's responses to such requests were described to me as infuriating. So here's hoping. so, who knows how long it will take Canvas to fix the issue. My options are, as I told you, to do something on an online quiz-making site, or just print out the quiz on paper and give it to you and hand it back in a week or something. So I'll figure out what to do on that, but that's just an update on what's going on. I guess that's the only thing. Okay, Black History Month, and I'm continuing my honoring of Black History Month by honoring people, Black American Catholics who are on their way to sainthood. And today I'm going to talk about this beautiful Black woman, Venerable Henriette DeLisle. Venerable Henriette DeLisle. You can tell from the Venerable that she is on the second stage to sainthood. She's not a servant of God. She is now a Venerable. And when did she live? She lived from 1813 until 1862. Maria Teresa. Oh, that maybe it was her name in religion. Anyways, she was from New Orleans in Louisiana. Remember, in the history of our nation, Louisiana was under the control of the French. They colonized the area, and so Louisiana has a lot of French influence, and New Orleans is a French city. So she you can tell from her name, Henriette DeLisle, that she was of French extraction, but she was also mixed. Certainly African, of African ancestry, which made her a Black woman in the eyes of, well, the white population, and possibly Spanish, but certainly African. She was what's called a free woman of color. You had these people who were called free men or free women of color who were not slaves. There were people who had their freedom and could and hence had some freedom within the society since they were not slave. She also is called a Creole of color because Creoles were people of mixed ancestry. So she's called a Creole of color. So that's some of her background. She, because of the French influence and the French colonization, Louisiana has a lot of Catholics in the state still today, but it's also back then. And she was Catholic, obviously, because I'm talking about her as a Black Catholic. Although you can see she's very light-skinned from this picture, but she didn't pass as white. She was Black. She was considered Black. They had this system called plissage in New Orleans and in Louisiana where, young women would be kind of paired off with other men, not as wives, but kind of as concubines, that kind of like mistresses in a way. It was kind of, part of the system, Being a Catholic culture, I don't know how they explained it or justified it, but that was kind of the avenue that her family expected Henriette to take, that she would participate in this plissage system and become the companion of some gentleman, which she resisted. She did not want to be part of that. Dad and marriage. Oh, because she considered, because it was a violation of the marriage bond, but also she had wishes to become a nun, to become a sister. So that obviously would not work for her if she were the concubine of some other man to be a part of a religious order of nuns, which she eventually was able to found. Her mother developed mental problems, and so the estate that they had was passed over to Henriette. So that tells you that they were people of means. They had some kind of money, because she was able to take this estate and then use the money to found the religious order of nuns that she wanted to. And what she did in 1836, she founded the Sisters of the Holy Family. 1836, she founded the Sisters of the Holy Family, which is the second surviving community of Black sisters in the country. There's another one that comes first, which I didn't talk about yet because I didn't talk about the person yet, Mother Mary Lang. So I apologize. I'm a little bit out of order here. But so you know, this is the second time that an order of black nuns was founded in the United States. You know, the nuns had as their charism or their characteristic spirituality taking care of the poor, taking care of the sick, taking care of the elderly, teaching slaves, which was kind of a revolutionary thing because typically slaves were not to be taught, but they did teach slaves. She is, well, I'll mention that in a minute. Because she was black, the Bishop of New Orleans, the Catholic bishop, would not allow her community to wear any kind of habit or uniforms. A habit is kind of a uniform that members of religious orders wear. Oftentimes these uniforms are based in dress from the Middle Ages. They're just customs, and there's some of the things that I think make religion kind of fun and interesting. But you know, these are modern times, and a lot of nuns don't wear habits or religious uniforms anymore. They wear like business suits, and they might have a little cross on their lapel or a little emblem from their order, but a lot of them don't wear the veils, the full veils and the full garments. But they obviously wanted to because this is the 1800s, but Bishop said no because you're blacks. And it might agitate the white population to see a bunch of black, powerful women, you know, these nuns out there, even if they're Catholics, even if it was a largely Catholic society at the time. Nope, he said no. They also could not take public vows. They had to take private vows of vowing themselves to the religious order. She is a holy woman. But she's a woman. She's a human being, like us all. And when you read the lives of the saints and the stories of people who were very holy people, they were still human beings. And that doesn't mean they didn't have their blind spots, their prejudices, their biases, their foibles, you know. They might have been mentally ill, you know. They might have had happy personalities. Some might have sad personalities. You know, God works with the clay that he's working with in the time period that people are living in. And we see this with Henriette DeLisle. I mean, there are some interesting things about her story, even though she did not participate in the plissage system of becoming a concubine. There's the possibility she might have had 2 kids out of wedlock. And even though she was a black woman, a free woman of color, but still in the eyes of the white society, a black woman, she did own slaves. How do we know this? Because when she died, in her will, she made the provision that her slave Betsy would go free when she died, not when she was alive, apparently. She died during the Civil War, 1862, okay? The war ended in 1865, so she was in the early years of the war, and she died when the Union Army was starting to occupy New Orleans, to take New Orleans from the Confederate States. It's a question, which side was she on? Because she wasn't in the Union, she was in the slave state that had seceded, so you don't know. I don't know what was going on in her mind. I don't know whose side she was on, but given her background, nevertheless. So it's there. I mean, it's just history to me is fascinating because you can't change the facts of history, really. It's just who she was. But she was still a woman who was completely consumed with doing the will of God, even if in some ways maybe she was writing straight with crooked lines, in a manner of speaking. 2001... on the TV channel Lifetime, which is devoted to a lot of, you know, geared more to a womanly audience, they had a movie, a made-for-TV movie on Venerable Henriette DeLisle. She was played by Vanessa Williams, who I believe at one time was Miss USA, and also is an actress and a model, so just maybe you can find it on YouTube. I should look on YouTube to see if anyone's uploaded it. So there you go. So I ask you, Venerable Henriette DeLisle, for your prayers for us that we would do well in this class. Amen. Whatever. I still don't know. I'm just looking at a little note I made for myself on this line. No, I still don't know what it means. Oh, well, Mr. Urban, you know, it happens. Okay. Here's a little thing to watch. Hope you find it interesting.
Hindu temple in
Let me go to that.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will tomorrow open a Hindu temple in the northern city of Ayodhya, an event that's being seen as the start of his election campaign. Millions of Hindus are celebrating, but for Muslims it evokes painful memories. A mock
Sorry to cut in on here just right there because I just wanted to point something out to you. Do you notice this image of candles on the ground? Yes. Does it kind of look like something? Ah, yes. No, Indians are not Nazis. It's a good luck symbol. And where do you think the Nazis got the symbol from? They thought they were the Aryans, that they descended from the Aryans who migrated into northern India. That's where they got it from. They stole it from India. So it does not come from the Nazis. This is a good luck symbol. If you ever go to India, you'll see this symbol, the swastika, all over in Hindu temples and Jain temples, meant to protect them and bring good graces on the temple. So in India, it's not a bad symbol at all. So don't freak out over it if you see it.
mosque, which stood on the site, was illegally torn down 30 years ago, triggering violence across the country. From Ayodhya, here's the BBC's South Asia correspondent, Yogita Lamai.
A display of Hindu faith in a manner that's perhaps never been seen before in modern India. Hail Lord Ram, they shout, in praise of one of their most revered deities. Ayodhya is described as his birthplace in Hindu epics, and at the spot that millions believe he was born, a grand temple will now be opened by the Prime Minister.
Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Ram.
हमारा जो सपना था वो साकार हो गया.
Our dream has finally become a reality. It's like God Himself has appeared before us. This city has shaped India. It sits on one of the country's biggest Hindu-Muslim fault lines. The temple, built at a spot where a mosque once stood. Many see it as a declaration of Hindu dominance.
We don't want to destroy anyone's mosque, but what has been built on the birthplace of our gods, we will not tolerate that from now on.
The site was given to Hindus by a Supreme Court order. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent on the temple, funded from private donations. But the Prime Minister's presence would turn a religious ceremony into a state event, many say. Especially controversial because of the history of the site. Until 1992, a 16th century mosque stood there.
They raised the Catholic flag.
Illegally destroyed after a mass campaign by Hindu mobs. Religious violence broke out across India. Thousands were killed.
Campaign which has now led to hundreds of deaths.
For Ayodhya's Muslims, it was a painful time. Anwari Begum's husband, Muhammad Amin, was among 17 killed in Ayodhya. They cut his arms and legs off and stuffed his body in a sack, she tells us. On that day, I lost my biggest support, the person I shared my life with. Her son Sohrab had hoped the country's leaders would reach out to them.
They should have come to us and said what happened was wrong. They should have showed compassion, but they haven't.
Many in the community told us they're worried there might be trouble again after the inauguration, and so they were leaving the city for a few weeks.
All major political parties have sought to appease voters through this politics of religion. But for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP, its support of the temple as part of its aggressive assertion of Hinduism is the reason why it's transformed from being a small party just a few decades ago to being seen as one that is virtually undefeatable now.
At a local BJP office, Preparations are on for the inauguration. I met a member of parliament from the party, Lalu Singh.
Do you think it's appropriate for the Prime Minister of a secular country to be the main figure at a major Hindu religious event?
100%. It's 100% right. The culture of the majority community in a country dominates the nation. This does not mean we do not respect minorities.
The opening of the temple is being seen as the start of Prime Minister Modi's re-election bid, and is expected to give him another resounding victory, one that could further polarize the nation. Yogita Damani, BBC News, Ayodhya.
One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject.
I don't want him. I mean, he's nice, but not what I'm interested in right now. Okay, so the Ayodhya in India, what they're talking about. This is mentioned, I think, just once in the textbook, I believe. It mentions the situation. And about 30 years ago, there was a mosque there. The mosque was built in the 1500s, I believe, on the site which Hindus believe was the birthplace. They set up their god Ram, but really Ram or Rama, sometimes the A is left silent. Rama is really an appearance of the god Vishnu. Okay, so he's really Vishnu, but he's also this guy Ram. So how can a god be born and have just go with it. It's Hinduism. The gods are born, the gods die, all sorts of stuff. Anyways, so they believe that's literally the site where he was born. And in the 1500s, the Muslim community built a mosque there. I don't know if they built the mosque there to kind of like chagrin or to agitate or anger the local Hindus by building it on Ram's birthplace. I have no idea what the purpose of it was, but it was built. And apparently that angered a lot of Hindu people because they saw it as an offense against their religion, against their god that they worship. So about 30 years ago, as it said, just a mob of people went there, just tore down the whole mosque and destroyed it. What to do about that has lingered in the courts for decades. As I told you, it went all the way up to the Indian Supreme Court, and the Indian Supreme Court basically said, India is Hindu. Hindu means India. They're one and the same. So we should build a Hindu temple there. I think they're going to build a mosque nearby. So they're kind of split the difference. They'll say, to placate the majority population, we will build a Hindu mandir or temple on the site of Ram's birth, our God, but the Muslims will get their little mosque on the side. So so they're kind of splitting the difference there. But that's what's going on with it. And the Prime Minister of India is using this, as they said, as a political platform. The party he belongs to, the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party, does not separate the religion from the nation. Okay, which is very different from our country, which is, where religion, you have a freedom of religion, but the government does not establish any religion as the one that people have to follow or should follow. The same thing is supposed to work in principle in India. She said it's a secular state. There is no really official religion, but again, remember, Hindu means India. The religion and India being Indian are so entwined that it's hard to really separate. And you kind of see that in some of the comments of the people, that the culture, it's more than a culture in a way. It's their identity. So it makes perfect sense that the Prime Minister should be there, which he was a couple of weeks ago, in opening up the mosque and participating in the worship ceremonies and even leading some of them, offering worship to the statue of Ram and stuff like that. So there you go. The Muslims are kind of seen as a foreign influence. They're seen as outsiders. Why? Because they don't come from India. Islam comes from the Middle East. It doesn't come from Mother India. So it's foreign, even though it's been there for centuries and centuries and centuries. Christianity has been in India possibly 2,000 years, and it's still seen as a foreign imposition because it doesn't come from India. All right, so there's that nationalistic aspect to the religion that you need to be aware of. And it seems to be getting worse. Well, it depends on how you look at it. If you're a Hindu, a lot of Hindus think it's great, That's why they support Modi. But if you're Christians and Muslims, it's not so great because you have acts of violence committed to you by these mobs of Hindus. Christian churches are attacked, you have mosques that are destroyed, and so it's an issue certainly for the minorities. Okay, there we go. Get my notes. Where do we stop? Recording. Just want to check something here. I'll do it later. All right, doing fine. There we stop. Oh, no, these are not the notes that I want. These are the notes that I want. Sorry about that. So I was talking about the Shruti and the Smriti. The story of Rama, by the way, comes from the Smriti collections, the Ramayana, or the Ramayan, which we'll talk about later, maybe today, God willing. Or should I say God's willing, because we're doing Hinduism, Mr. Pratt, you know what I'm saying? I got to make my own fun. But we talked about the Smriti and the Shruti and the Smriti, and we'll talk now first about the Shruti. What comprises the Shruti, which is kind of like the divine revelation, the direct revelation that these ancient rishis or seers of India received about the universe. Well, there are 4 that are considered Shruti, properly speaking. We have the Vedas, we have the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, or sometimes called the Aranyaks, and the Upanishads. These are the 4 parts of the Shruti. If you want to simplify it, well, maybe this is kind of a simplification, but the Shruti are primarily identified with the 4 Vedas, the Vedas. And so we'll talk about those first, I believe. Veda comes from the Sanskrit word Veda, which means knowledge. Okay? And remember, Sanskrit, the ancient language of Sanskrit, is part of this language family which includes Greek and Latin and Armenian and all sorts of other languages, including English. And so Veda is kind of close to wisdom. Look at it. And the D there and the W sound. Okay, wisdom, which has the same kind of meaning of knowledge. So they're related words, Veda. The Vedas are oral poetry. They start out, again, as oral poetry. They're spoken, but they eventually get written down, scholars believe, sometime between 1200 and 600 BC. The focus of the Vedas is almost exclusively on the correct, proper performance of sacrificial rituals. As we'll come to see, each of the Vedas deals with some aspect of the whole ritual of sacrificing animals to the gods. They have to be done properly. Otherwise, you offend the gods, and you disrupt the dharma, the order of the universe, if you don't do them correctly. The study of the Vedas was restricted to high caste males, men who are at the highest level of the societal structure. Okay, so women weren't allowed to study them. People of lower rank were not allowed to study them. According to legend, according to legend, there was really only one wisdom, one Veda, but a rishi named Vyasa divided the one Veda into the 4 that we have. Hence, it's the plural, the Vedas. There's not just one Veda, but there are 4 of them. Eventually, as you will see, there's some development in the composition of the Vedas. Vasya. Whether he existed or not, who knows? We don't know. He's a legend, so we'd say he's a legendary figure. Okay. The Vedas are not books like other scriptures. They are shruti, what is heard. So it emphasizes their auditory primacy. They need to be heard. And that you see from the fact that they were first passed on orally, they would be sung by the teacher, the guru, to the student, and the student would memorize them. So they're received orally through the sound of the hymns and the prayers which were recited, and then the texts were drilled into the memory of succeeding generations of other priests. In fact, writing down the words of the Vedas or any of the Hindu revelation is seen as actually polluting the sacred word. It's not really a good thing that the scriptures get written down. They should be given orally. It's a sign kind of the degradation of the times that we're living in, maybe evil times or times that are imperfect, that the Vedas have to be written down because people can't remember them without the aid of scriptures. It's only in the age of disorder that the Shruti will get written down. So that's not a good thing. There eventually are 4 Vedas that are recognized: the Rig, the Yajur, the Sama, and the Atharva. These are called the 4 Samhitas of the Veda. So you say Rig Veda Samhita. Samhita is a collection, just a collection. It's a Sanskrit word for collection. So first we have the Rig, which comes from the Sanskrit word rik, which means praise, but it can also mean a verse, like a verse in a song. So literally, Rig Veda means the knowledge of praise, or knowledge of the verses. Scholars consider the Rig the oldest of the Vedas, probably written down around 1200 BC. And as the name kind of hints at by saying it's the knowledge of verses, like of songs, it's a collection of around 1,020 hymns to various gods and goddesses. The Rig is divided up into 10 books. And, with the advent of religious studies work back in the 1800s and Europeans showing up and kind of bringing the tools of modern literature, criticism and stuff like that, the Vedas, which are seen as sacred texts and maybe weren't studied in such a way by Hindus traditionally, European scholars took the tools of literary criticism and applied them to the Vedas as written human works of literature. And so they're able to determine some things about the Vedas. There are 10 books in the Rig Veda. Books 2 to 7 are probably the oldest, have been identified by scholars as the oldest core of the Vedas, books 2 to 7. Everything else would then be later. The first book of the Vedas and the last book, the 10th book, are considered the latest, and they're more speculative. And the Vedas are, the Rig Veda, the hymns are arranged according to the god's address. So if you look go online and find a online copy of the Rig Veda, and you look through the various hymns, you'll see up at the top of the hymn, number, book 2, hymn number 100, and it'll say Indra. So that's the main focus of the hymn. The most addressed god, in case you're interested, is Indra, who was the supreme god of the Aryans, the Aryans who migrated in. So they brought their main god with them. Indra is the bringer of rain. The second most addressed god after Indra is the god Agni. We have Indra, then we have Agni. And Agni is the god of fire and also a messenger god of fire, interestingly enough. So if you compare it with the name Agni from Sanskrit, of course, with ignis from Latin, which also means fire, you can see how they're related languages. To ignite, to set on fire. So Agni is the god of fire the fire of the sacrifice. and also a messenger god, as I said. The Yajur Veda, its name comes from Sanskrit, the word yajus, which means the sacrificial formula, the kind of mantras or ritual formulae that the priest would need to use, or the person, the officiant, would need to use in performing the sacrifice. So Yajur Veda can be translated as knowledge of the sacrifice, or the proper performance of the sacrifice. And the Yajur is a manual. It contains sacrificial prayers and formulae that will be used by the performing priest. And in any kind of traditional Hindu sacrifice, you don't just have one priest. You have a number of people who are part of the process. You have the priest who will offer the sacrifice. You have the priest that will chant the mantras. Other priests that will assist and stuff like that. So they each seem to have their own kind of book for their duties. And this one contains the ritual prayers. Also in the Yajur, there are some explanations, there are some attempts to explain the ritual, why you're doing the ritual and what the mantras mean, what these sacred words you're speaking mean. There are two versions of the Yajur. There's a black and a white version. The one version, the black version, is called black by followers of the white version because they want to lift up their version of, there are two different versions, so they have two different parties. And so to show that theirs is better, they call the other version black and theirs is white. Okay? So we have the better version. So we're the white Yajur Veda, followers of the white copy of the Yajur Veda. But those who follow the lesser version, there's a Freudian slip. Yeah. A Freudian slip is, it's when you're thinking of one thing, but you say a mother. Anyways, the black version, However, scholars have determined that possibly, it seems, the black is actually the older of the two versions, and it's the longer of the two versions too, but it seems to be older than the white version. Then we come to the Sama Veda, which in Sanskrit means chant or melody, sama, a chant or a melody. So this gives you the hymns, but it gives you the kind of melodies that you're supposed to chant them to or sing them to. So it's knowledge of the chants, the saman. So the sama is a collection of songs and melodies that are used in the sacrificial ritual. Are you seeing a thread here? Okay, the sacrifice. Right? The sama was written sometime around 500 BC, and it follows the rig pretty closely. Obviously, because the rig has the hymns. So, this is dealing with the tunes that should go with the hymns that you should sing them to. So obviously there would be a connection with the book of the hymns, which is the rig. It just says the sama provides the melody. Though scholars have noted there is some rearrangement of the verses that one finds in the Rig hymns. So the sama is basically a repeat of the Rig Veda. All but 75 verses are found also in the Rig. So most of it's found in the Rig, except 75 verses. I guess those are added by whoever wrote the Sama. So not very many verses, but there is some difference. Why do you need to know the tunes? Because you need to know the proper pitch and tone for singing the hymns, because these give creative power to the singer. So again, that oral element, the oral of singing the hymns, not just reading them but reciting them properly, has a power to it. And it does things in the universe. It changes the universe. So you have to sing them properly. The Rig, the Yajur, and the Sama are called the threefold knowledge, the Trividya. Trividya. Three. I write that down. Tri is three. And Vidya, knowledge. Which tells us something about the development of these books. It kind of tells us that probably the Rig, the Yajur, and the Sama were the earliest collection. And maybe something came later, i.e. the Atharva, which is why I have it in a different color. The Atharva is the last and the lowest of the Vedas. And here in the Atharva, you see kind of a lack of connection to the public Vedic sacrifices. And because it's so disconnected from the sacrifices, it was denied status as a Veda per se. It was originally not considered part of the Vedas. How it did become part of the Vedas is not particularly clear, not exactly clear. But what seems to have happened for some reason, a group of people decided to add a book of hymns and just started claiming that it's part of the Vedas. So we really have 4 Vedas. It was like, what do you call it? Publicity campaign. There are 4 Vedas, and it includes the Atharva. And the compilers of the Atharva added onto that by claiming that their Veda the Atharva Veda was legitimate because it actually comes from the father of fire, Atharvan. This man, his name is Atharvan, hence the Atharva Veda. Actually, I put that on PowerPoint. Who's the father of fire, the giver of fire. So our group that created this Atharva Veda, go all the way back to this figure, this mythological figure, who introduced the fire worship to begin with, the sacrifice to begin with. So, of course, the Atharva Veda is part of the Vedas and should be part of the Vedas. So, a translation for the Atharva Veda is the knowledge of the fire sacrifice. It's giving knowledge about what the fire sacrifice is really about. The knowledge of the fire sacrifice, because its knowledge is a Veda from Atharva, who is the bringer of fire, and specifically the fire sacrifice. So what's in the Atharva Veda? Well, it's filled with charms, magic, curses. There are some hymns for healing or also inflicting injury, hymns of praise. There are philosophical speculations on the meaning of life or the order in the universe, and these are all mixed together. So it's not you can see it's not primarily focused so much on the fire sacrifice, hence it's much later. It's very different from the other Vedas, and can see why it probably had some resistance to accepting it as part of the Vedas, but by kind of creating up this kind of legendary story that it comes from the father of fire, Atharvan, and who created the fire sacrifice, and it really should be part of the 4 Vedas, and just over and over saying that there are 4 Vedas through repetition, people kind of like said, okay, we give it. We'll make it part of the Vedas. We'll accept it as part of the Vedas. This is an example from the Atharva Veda. Does anyone want to read this example from the Atharva Veda just to give you a little taste of what's in it? This is a charm to arouse the passionate love of a man. Okay, Mr. Holstein, go ahead.
From your head to your feet, I love, O God, send forth the yonder and birth. Favor this day together. O God, send forth the giving love. May yonder man burn down. If you ran 3 leagues away, 5 leagues, the distance coursed by a courser, from there you shall again return. You shall be the father of our sons.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. So this is a charm that, a woman or a man, I don't judge, but probably given Indian society at the time, it would be a woman who would go to a priest or the holy man to receive this, they would give her this charm for her to generate love in this man that she wants to love her and to become her husband and have children with, okay? So, it's going to kind of force him to love her. So it has this magical element. But just to explain some of the details in this charm, Anumati is another name. Well, actually, I changed it. Hanuman, so forget that. Hanuman is a monkey god, okay, who is associated with Rama, who helps Rama in a battle with a demon. So it invokes this monkey god, Hanuman. And it evokes Akuti, who is a female goddess, who is the daughter of Brahma, the creator god. Okay? So you invoke some gods to help you to bring about what you want to happen. That if he runs 3 miles away or 5 miles away, apparently he doesn't want, it's like, leave the dude alone. He's running away. No! I'm going to send the monkey god and the daughter of Brahma after you. We'll bring you back. You will be the father of my sons. Notice, Mr. Bowski, she doesn't ask for daughters. Well, that's what you want, really. That's part of the society, that even today, that you want to have sons first. Daughters, yes, are good, but first you want to have sons. So that's just there. In fact, there's a problem in India that with abortions, that they're having problems with Indian women who are, when they find out that the fetus is going to be female, and it's like maybe their first child, they just abort it because it's female. They want to have male sons first. It's part of the culture. You can see this all going all the way back to the Atharva Veda in the Vedas. Okay, so you see that it's somewhat different from the others. All right, let's move on to the Brahmanas. Each Veda has kind of like another Shruti scripture attached to it. So each Veda has a Brahmana. Each Veda has an Aranyaka. These are add-ons to the Vedas. They're not Vedas, but they're connected to the Vedas. The Brahmanas are called the book regarding sacred power. They're the book regarding sacred power. Brahman is the ultimate divine power of the universe. And so the Brahmanas are talking about that and telling you how to tap into it. So what are the Brahmanas? They were written between 1000 and 650 BC, and they are ritual books with more detailed instructions about performing the sacrifices. And as I said, each Veda has one. You have the Rig Veda Brahmana, you have a Yajur Veda Brahmana, and you have a Sama Veda Brahmana. So the Brahmanas are all connected to the Vedas and add more explanations. They are, in the case of they are commentaries on the mantras, these sacred sayings that people, kind of like magical sayings or statements that people will say over and over again. The Brahmanas contain commentaries on these mantras that are found in the Vedas. But since they are regarding the sacred power or the Brahman, this ultimate divine force of the universe or power of the universe, the Brahmanas are also focused on explaining that sacred power, explaining Brahman that lies behind the rituals, the power that lies behind the rituals and is trying to be unleashed. So it deals with these ritual utterances, again, these mantras, these statements that the priests will make in the ritual, and they're very important for honoring the gods. And they also help keep the universe intact, because Brahman is the basis of the universe. Next, we move on to the third type of Shruti, the Aranyakas, or the Aranyaks. Literally, Aranyakas means something given in the forest. So these would be lectures or talks or discourses that would be given to students in the forest, where nobody's around, so they can't hear them. They're kind of like secret discourses. So sometimes the Aranyakas are described as the forest meditations. The forest meditations. And then put this on the board or on the PowerPoint right here. Scholars believe that the Aranyakas were composed sometime around 1000 BC. And again, each Veda has its own special Aranyaka. So the Aranyakas were given in the forest secretly because it was believed to be that the knowledge they were imparting was inappropriate for most people to know. It was not good for common knowledge. And the Aranyakas developed in combination with the Brahmanas. So that's why they're both on the same PowerPoint slide. They're in combination with each other. They're related. And each Veda has one grouping, except, interestingly enough, the Atharva Veda. So again, this points to scholars to the fact that the Atharva Veda was probably not original to the Vedic system of writings. It was added on much later because there is no Aranyaka specifically written for the Atharva Veda, but there is one for the Rig, the Sama, and the Yajur, or Rig, Yajur, and Sarma. What do they contain? The Aranyakas contain explanatory and speculative knowledge, secret knowledge, theorizing on the sacrifice, what its purpose is, what its meaning is in the universe. Especially, there seems to be a lot of focus on the fire of the sacrifice and what that has to do with things. So what the texts do is they kind of spiritualize the sacrificial ceremonies so that each part of the sacrifice symbolizes something else. Whereas, the Vedas specifically are concerned with the nuts and bolts, the Aranyakas are more theoretical. Okay, when the priest does this action during the sacrifice, it's more they give you kind of like an idea of, this is really what's going on. Okay, he physically does this, but here's the real secret meaning of his action. It's relationship in the universe. So each action of the sacrifice has a transcendent quality to it. It has an effect in the universe, and that's what the Aranyakas are trying to explain. Our final bit or piece of the Shruti are these lectures or discourses called the Upanishads. The word Upanishads comes from the words Upanishad, which means to sit down nearby. In other words, to sit nearby your teacher to listen to him. That's how teaching was done. The teacher would sit, and the students would all sit on the ground near him. So Upanishad, sitting down nearby. And Upanishads contain the teachings of these gurus to the students. I give you a definition of a guru. A guru is a spiritual guide or teacher. Oops. That's all it means. Spiritual guide or teacher, a guru. It comes from the Sanskrit word which means heavy. The word guru comes from the Sanskrit word which means heavy, implying like heavy with knowledge or full of knowledge is what a guru is. Heavy. Heavy, Mr. Dunn. That's heavy stuff. Yes, I know. Okay. The Upanishads were composed sometime between 600 BC and after. Actually, in my notes, I have between 700 and 300 BC, but I'll go with the PowerPoint. Sometime after 600 BC. And they're a compilation of texts detailing dialogues between gurus and their students. About what? About the identity and relationship of the individual self to the ultimate ground of existence. Our friend Brahman again, this ultimate transcendent power of the divine power of the universe. So what is the relationship between me and that power of Brahman? So these are the discussions going on. I'll get to that in a second. With the Upanishads, the Vedic tradition is seen to have ended. The Upanishadic literature is part of the end of the Vedic tradition. All those things which were kind of commenting on the Vedic corpus of writings, the body of writings. And the Upanishads is, the scriptures and sacred writings of Hinduism are very, very complex. Very, very complex. And we're kind of getting the tip of the iceberg here. But the Upanishads kind of, transcend both the Vedic revelation and the Shruti, but the Upanishads are part of a broader category of literature called the Vedanta, which are the end of the Vedas. This Vedantic tradition. What is the Vedanta? It's a name which means the end of the Vedas. It's bringing to completion the Vedic revelation. So it's this body of literature which completes the Vedic revelation, brings it to an end, puts kind of like a bow on it. And it's the culmination of the Vedas. Scholars recognize three parts of the Vedanta, the Upanishads I've already mentioned, but then there are two others the Bhagavad Gita, which actually belongs to the Smriti. So again, as I said, it kind of transcends. The Upanishads are considered part of Shruti, but then you've got the Smriti book, or the Smriti scripture here, the Bhagavad Gita, and then this thing called the Brahma Sutra. The Bhagavad Gita we'll talk about the Upanishads a little bit more, and then we'll talk about the Bhagavad Gita. The Brahma Sutra, I'm not going to say much about it. It was composed in the 500s AD. I'll tell you that much. And its purpose was to kind of sum up and bring order to the teaching that's found in the Upanishads. Okay, so it has a relationship with the Upanishadic teaching. Tries to give some order to it. Scholars identify some characteristics of this literature, the Vedantic literature. And what are they? They're very focused on these ideas of Atman, Advaita, and Maya. What are these things? We'll talk more about Atman later, but I give you a definition there. Atman is simply a Sanskrit word which means the permanent self, your self-identity, your individual identity, which is not the same thing as your body. It's also not the same thing as your personality, in a way. I shouldn't say personality. Sometimes you'll see it translated as soul, but that's not a good translation. That's a Western translation, because the Western scholars had to kind of come up with an idea that it was equivalent, and it's not really the soul. It's that thing that kind of undergirds your your personality. That's why I shouldn't say that it's your personality per se. It undergirds the personality that you present to the world. It's this permanent self. And the basic insight of the Vedantic literature, so the view that they all kind of share, is the belief that your permanent self, the ultimate thing that you are, is identical to Brahman. It's identical to the divine source of the universe. So Advaita, not two things. You are not two things. There's not an Atman and an Advaita. Really, they are one and the same. So Advaita is the belief in the non-duality of the individual self from the ultimate source of reality, which is Brahman. That's especially the view of the Upanishads and what the gurus are trying to teach in the Upanishads. You want to... there really is no individual self. The Atman is completely united with Brahman. You're one and the same, and realizing that will bring you to true freedom. So the identification of the individual self, or the Atman, with the Absolute, which is Brahman. However, that's the belief, that's the teaching that you'll find in the Vedantic literature, but they have to explain why the universe seems to show individuality. Why in this room we have 20-some people who seem to be 25 individual Atmans. How is that? How do you explain that, which seems to be an obvious experience? Well, that's where this concept of Maya comes in, or illusion. That really the individuality that we see in the world, or that we feel in ourselves, like we feel that there is a permanent individual self, these are actually illusions. The physical world that we experience is more an illusion than reality. It doesn't mean it's not real, that you're not experiencing it, but it's not permanent, is what they're trying to say. Okay, it's not fixed. It's not eternal like Brahman is, or like the Atman. So to realize that really the physical universe you experience and your individuality is really an illusion, and that you are truly actually identifiable with Brahman, the divine source of the universe, this is the truth that leads to liberation and freedom. How do you realize this? There are a variety of ways. One of the ways is through knowledge or meditation. So meditation practices are big in Hindu religion. If you realize that you and Brahman which is not God, by the way. This is not talking about a God. It's the divine reality of the universe. It's impersonal. It's not a personal God. But when you find your identity with Brahman and you achieve this saving knowledge, there's no need for a separate Atman that's being constantly reborn through various lives over and over again. This is another very prevalent view in a lot of Indian religions, not just Hinduism, but the belief that your Atman, this one permanent self, gets reborn over and over again in this cycle of lives. But once you realize that this is all really an illusion and that you're really part of the one Brahman, this doesn't need to happen anymore. There's no reason to be reborn. You've been freed. And I'll read this. This is just one example from the Chandogya Upanishad, number 6, verse 12, the parable of Udalaka. This man Udalaka, who is a guru, is called father, but he's a guru to this student, Shvetaketu. And Udalaka gives a variety of examples to kind of explain the fact that his Atman, Shvetaketu's Atman, really is not divorced from or separated from Brahman, the source of the universe. And so he gives this one example of a seed from a tree or from fruit. He says, "Fetch me a fruit from the Nyagroda tree. Here is one, sir, or master. Break it. It is broken, sir. What do you see there? These seeds, almost extremely small. Take one of the seeds and break one of them. It is broken, sir. What do you see there? Not anything, sir." And here comes the teaching. The father said, the guru, "My son, that fine essence which you do not perceive there, that you don't see, of that very essence, this great Nyagroda tree exists. Believe it, my son. That which is the fine essence, in it all that exists has itself. It is the true, it is the self, and you, Shvetaketu, are it." Fine essence, when it talks about a fine essence, is talking about Brahman. It's talking about Brahman. You can take a piece of fruit from the tree, break it open down to its smallest components, the seeds, where you see nothing there, but what you're actually seeing is Brahman underlying everything, even the seeds. And so if it underlies the seeds of this piece of fruit, it also underlies your own self. And what you're supposed to lead yourself to understand is that you are also that. That fine essence which underlies the seed also underlies you. You are one and the same. So you get this famous statement that's repeated over and over again in this dialogue. You are that. This thing that is there, this Brahman, you are one and the same with it. Tat tvam esi. Or asi, Tat tvam asi. You are that. That, tvam, you, asi, are. You are that, Shvetaketu. You are one and the same. This statement that you find repeated throughout the dialogues of the Upanishads to bring home this point is one of the 4 or 5 great sayings that express the unity of Brahman and Atman. It's not the only one. You have other statements that these are like mantras that Hindus will say to themselves. Let's say they might meditate on that phrase tat tvamasi, tat tvamasi, tat tvamasi over and over again, or they might use the phrase aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman, or I am Atma Brahma. This Atman is Brahman. And these would be things you do in meditation, and you think over and over again, which hopefully will open up your mind to the fact that you realize that, yeah, we are one and the same. There is no difference between us. There is no difference between the fine essence that is in the seed of the fruit as between Shvetaketu, the person. The underlying reality is the same. It's all Brahman. What are the Smriti literature? Well, we have 5 kinds that are identified. We have the Ramayana, also known as the Ramayan. We have the Mahabharata. We have the Bhagavad Gita, the Dharma Shastras, and the Puranas. This is not a mistake in the PowerPoint that you might think, well, shouldn't there be a space between the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita? No, because the Bhagavad Gita is found within the Mahabharata. It's become such a famous writing that it's been kind of taken out of the Mahabharata, but it actually is part of this Shruti scripture called the Mahabharata. The Smriti, as I told you, maybe I didn't tell you, but I'll tell you now, are not eternal like the Shruti, but the Smriti are considered to be derived from the Shruti and developed out of the Shruti. So they're a more indirect revelation of the truth of the universe. But both are always authoritative. Both the Shruti and the Smriti are authoritative for believing Hindus. And the Smriti that we're talking about here includes an immense amount of literature. These are the main ones that are identified by scholars, but within these pieces of literature, especially the Dharma Shastras and the Puranas, just find all sorts of more writings within those. These are just categories in some senses. I don't know what that means. The first two, the Ramayana or the Ramayan and the Mahabharata, are epic poems. Epic poems. They're telling, well, I shouldn't say that, but they're epic poems. They're telling these great long stories. And sometimes the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are called the fifth Veda because they're open to all people, regardless of caste. Remember, the Vedas can only be studied by people in the higher echelons of society, but the epics like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata can be read by anybody. So they're considered the fifth Veda, and they become the means for instructing the people in the religion, whereas the Vedas are more focused on instructing the priests, the priesthood, and how to practice the rituals of the religion. The Smriti literature, especially these epic poems, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, are means for providing more direct religious instruction to the people. So what are they? Let's start with the Ramayana. The Ramayana, the name Ramayana simply means the story of Ram or Rama, which we heard about at the beginning of class. I would also add Sita, his wife, but anyways, story of Rama. It was composed sometime between the 200s BC and the 200s AD, and it's attributed to the Rishi or the seer Valmiki. Again, a legendary figure. We don't know if he actually existed. And I'll just give you a brief outline of the story. It's a long story, but briefly, Rama is considered to be an appearance of the god Vishnu. So he's a divine figure, Mr. Pratt. And he's born as a king. And Rama is oftentimes seen as the model of kingly virtue, how a ruler should be and act. In the story, if I remember the story correctly, I think Rama goes out to the forest and he's seen by a female demon who thinks he's kind of handsome and wants him, and Rama rejects her. So she gets pissed off, she gets angry, and she goes to her brother demon and tells him what happened, and he goes to get revenge by kidnapping Rama's wife, Sita, and takes her to Sri Lanka, which is a country beneath India. If we look at our maps, which is right here. If you look at the very bottom of the country of India, there's this large island called Sri Lanka, which is not mainly Hindu, by the way, even though it's so closely related to India. It's actually mostly Buddhist. Buddhism survived there. Anyways, the demon takes her down to this island of Sri Lanka where he holds on to her. So Ram has to go down and save her. He is helped by this friend, this monkey god who helps him. In fact, Hanuman, that we've encountered before in the charm for the passionate love of a man, Hanuman and his fellow monkey army, they all link tails from India to the island of Sri Lanka so Ram can walk across their monkey bridge of tails in the story. And he goes to fight this demon and to save his wife. The name of the demon is Ravana. I have a picture of him on the PowerPoint. There we go. There's the battle. Does it show the monkey bridge? Well, it shows the monkeys. Here are the monkeys and Hanuman and his monkeys. And here's the battle. And here's, I believe, Ram in the blue. Because a lot of the times the gods are portrayed with blue skin. It means darkness, so that they have dark skin. But they don't they give them blue skin to indicate that they have dark skin. Anyways, and here's the many-armed demon Ravana that he's fighting against to get back his wife Sita. And he eventually gets Sita back, and the story continues and tells all sorts of other stories. It's not really a happy ending. I mean, Ram is conceived of as the personification of righteousness and the righteous king. And also Rama and Sita are conceived of as the ideal married couple. Okay, so it has connections to Hindu weddings and stuff like that. But it is kind of a sad story, at least for Sita, because later on in the story, there's just an episode where Sita, for some reason, has to stay in the house of another man. I don't know why. Well, people begin to talk, because why is she in the house of a man who's not her husband? What were they doing, you know? So there's kind of this implication that she's an adulteress. And so, you know, Rama doesn't believe it. He receives her back. She still has to kind of prove her virtue. I think she has to sit in fire and not be burned, and she proves her virtue. And he receives her back, and things are going along fine, but people are still talking, and there's still gossip about Sita, you know, that she was in the house of another man, and it becomes she becomes a political liability for Rama as king. So he kind of decides he has to get rid of her. And Sita, in response to that, appeals to the goddess of the earth to take her, and the earth kind of opens up and swallows Sita into the earth, and there you go. So it's not really a kind of a happy ending for Sita, and I'm not sure how that shows if it shows the ideal relationship between husband and wife, that the husband's going to get rid of the wife if people are gossiping about her, but nevertheless, they are considered the ideal married couple. So Rama is very important, as you can see, to Hindu culture. He's one of their gods. Even for dying people, it's a custom to whisper the name of Rama into the ear of a dying person. And there was the practice, because Sita sat in flames to prove her purity and was not burned by them. There arose the practice of women, if their husband predeceased them, when the body of the husband was burned on the funeral pyre, because they didn't bury bodies in India, they would burn them on pyres. The woman would also get up on the pyre, the wife, to be burned with the body of her dead husband. Practice that the British kind of stamped out, you know, and they really don't do in modern India anymore, although it derives from this story. The next epic is the Mahabharata, which translates to the great story of the Bharata family. Maha means great in Sanskrit, and Bharata is referring to this family Bharata, which also the word Bharata is Sanskrit for the land of India. So you could say it's kind of like the great story of India itself. And this huge epic poem was written sometime between the 400s BC and the 400s AD, possibly by this guy Vyasa again, but who knows? We don't even know if he existed, but it's attributed to him. The Mahabharata is a huge and extremely complex epic poem. In fact, it's the longest epic poem known to exist. It's like 200,000 verses. And while it has an overarching storyline and an arc, it comprises various myths, legends, genealogies, lists of people's family members, and other books. Like I showed you the Bhagavad Gita. You have a whole book of the Bhagavad Gita that's taken out of this epic poem. You have another. It repeats the whole story of the Ramayana in the Mahabharata. Just tell it over again. I don't know if they tell it over in the same way if they summarize it, because I haven't read the whole Mahabharata, but it's there. In addition to all sorts of other mythological stories and stuff. But what's it generally about? The Mahabharata is generally a long story about his king, his two sons, their progeny, their sons and daughters, and the struggle for the right of succession after the father dies, the struggle for the kingdom. So the Mahabharata describes the events that lead up to a war of succession between these two sons and the two families, these two competing families, the sons of Pandu, who are called, since the sons of Pandu are called the Pandavas, and the sons of Kuru, who are called the Kauravas. So to make a long story, actually a very, very long story short, what happens? Well, the eldest of the sons of Pandu is a man named Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira. And then the eldest son of the sons of Kuru is Duryodhana. Spell it right. Donna each. And they get into a kerfuffle that really has nothing to do with the kingdom, but anyways, the father dies, and so you have Yudhishthira of the sons of Pandu, and you have Duryodhana of the sons of Kuru, they're co-kings of this kingdom. They share the kingdom. But there's an incident where Yudhishthira insults Duryodhana. Apparently Duryodhana shows up, he falls into a pond or something, and Yudhishthira laughs at him, which is a tremendous insult. So to regain his honor, Duryodhana challenges Yudhishthira to a series of dice matches, which Yudhishthira is a bad gambler, and he loses all of them, and eventually he loses even the right to be king. He gambles away his kingship for a period of time. So he agrees he and his whole family have to go into exile for a number of years. But when he comes back, Duryodhana says, once you've served your time, you come back, you'll be co-king again. So that happens. And there are a whole bunch of stories in the Mahabharata what goes on when they're in exile. But Yudhishthira returns with his family, and Duryodhana refuses to honor the deal. He won't share kingship, and so you are going to have a war called, that's the Battle of Kurukshetra. The Kurukshetra. Okay? Now the Battle of Kurukshetra leads us into the book of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm not going to try to cram in the Bhagavad Gita. I'll talk about that in the Battle of Kurukshetra more in detail in the next class. So God bless you all. Have a good weekend. I will see you on Tuesday. Have a good day, miss. Thank you. Good day. Have a good day, miss.